Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin for CIMA E2 for November 2014. And the topic for this particular screencast is the matrix structure, as you'll see, and advantages and disadvantages. Now I draw your attention to question 3 of March 2013, so March last year, on the CIMA site. And if you're studying from the BPP exam kit, I'll draw your attention to question 44 on page 19. Okay, this is a 10-mark section A style question. The scenario or lack of scenario means that we can cut straight to the answer, but essentially we're talking about, what is a matrix structure and what's the upside and downside. And in terms of this particular area, you'll see that it comes up reasonably often. It's pretty straightforward, certain amount of rote learning required. And I guess the only way that they can come at this is either, as they have here in this question, or perhaps a comparison of the matrix structure to another structure, perhaps the pure project structure. So I definitely think it's a good idea to have a fix on the matrix and the 3 main types of lightweight, heavyweight, and balanced, and also perhaps just an idea of how you might compare your standard matrix structure to another structure, I guess pure, or possibly even the third one, the functional structure, so having that sort of project in-house. Okay, quick look at the answer here for us. Now, again, as I've said before in some of these other screencasts, the sort of the structure of their answer is slightly different from the BPP. As I said, I think BPP is a little bit better, more list type. But in terms of how they start here, here's their first paragraph, and they're really just suggesting that, where a range of skills are required, then certainly a matrix structure is going to be appropriate. Let's just bear in mind that, a matrix structure in effect is a sort of a standalone, a little sort of a entity, as it were, that sort of has access to staff or indeed functions throughout the organization. A couple of different types of matrix structure, as we know, but essentially what the matrix structure is looking to do is to feed off in some way the other core functions, be they sort of finance or IT or marketing, etc. Okay, so certainly a matrix structure would be the preferred structure, normally speaking. So what are the advantages of working within a matrix structure for a given project? Well, the first thing is that you'll find that for individuals involved in the projects, the development of new skills is certainly going to be something that would be considered an upside, because the individuals will be involved in issues that concern a wide range of areas within the organization. So they cannot help but to improve their core knowledge. They'll be dealing with other people, other specialists, and that's got to be good for their own sort of development, and indeed good for the business as well. Okay. Linked into that, I guess this point about sort of communication and coordination is improved. Well, it has to be, because they'll be working together, different departments, different specialists working together. So certainly communication, certainly for the project itself, is going to be improved, and indeed coordination too. And that's got to be a good thing for the business and of course the project. Okay. Next point here is, again, I guess a lot of these things are linked into sort of communication, as it were, and participation. That's what's mentioned here. And really what we're saying here with the third sort of advantage is the idea that, working together in that sort of group may well sort of help with a customer focus or indeed quality focus. And that in itself is going to lead to perhaps better customer satisfaction, and that's what most businesses are about. Okay, so there's the sort of the 3 main areas for the advantages. In terms of the disadvantages, more often than not, when these sort of advanced and disadvantaged type questions, as I've said before in classes, you generally just turn them on their heads and use an advantage as a disadvantage and vice versa. What they say here in effect is, because of this sort of dual role, as it were, or sort of lack of clear responsibility, there may well be clashes and tensions between the priorities or indeed tasks between specialist functions and indeed project tasks. Okay. Next point here is, I guess, the problem for the individual employee is just knowing, whose work should come first, as it were. Really, what we're saying is that it's ambiguous in some respects, and it may be difficult for the individual employee to know what to do first, or to know really what takes priority. It may well be that the employee, if they're not using a balance matrix, focuses on who's going to be signing off their salary at the end of the month, and that may well be their functional boss. Coupled with that, it may well be that the project manager doesn't sort of want to impose himself on the project team too much, because it may well be that he or she feels that in future his or her position may be different. Perhaps they'll be working as part of the team, so the project manager may be concerned about that. So that's obviously relevant here too. Final point, I'd always mentioned time and cost in some way in advantages and disadvantages questioned on either side, subject to the core element. But here what we're saying is that, this idea of bringing people together within a project and working sort of cross-functional, as it were, there must be a hell of a lot of time spent in meetings between the project team members and indeed the PM and various other stakeholders, including the owner, etc. So really, that does have a time and a cost implication to the company. And if we're not being efficient, then that's time not well spent, and certainly money not well spent. Okay, so there's a core issue, another one for us. Last thing here, the complexity of the matrix structure. I'm not so sure that I'd sort of agree with that necessarily, but what they're saying here, it can make it difficult to implement. So I guess we're talking about this idea of trying to coordinate people across perhaps a multitude of different functions, and it may well be difficult for the company to work in that way. And over and above that, because, again, reference to the first point above, because we're talking about people from different functions, it may well be that there is a certain amount of conflict as a result of their differing backgrounds and or interests. You can imagine perhaps a finance or accounting department versus a marketing department. That would be the sort of the classic area, and I'll draw your attention to the conflict area of your studies. Bear in mind that project management can be sort of examined on its own, or perhaps with another area, and I would favor the areas of obviously management, things like conflict and problems in that area. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. Good luck with your studies. Cheers.